Another issue that you might have to face is not knowing the root password for your system. This might have been maliciously changed by an administrator who perhaps is leaving the organization, or perhaps you've taken control of systems that were previously managed by other teams, and for whatever reason the root password hasn't been passed through to you. Or even quite simply, it's one of your old virtual machines and you can't remember the password that you used on that machine. Well, don't worry, all is not lost, and we're going to see how we can gain access to this system. So I've just interrupted the boot process. We can do this just using the up arrow key or the down arrow key on our grub menu. I've just gone back to the top entry, and of course that's what I want to boot to, but we don't go there directly. To be able to set our root password, we can use then E to edit, and then again, as we saw before in previous clips, we go down to the Linux 16 entry. So let me just arrow down until I get to my Linux 16 entry, and we can use Control and E to move to the end of the line. We need to remove two entries, quiet and RHGB, and it's nice there at the end of the line. We're going to need those removed so we can see the boot process. We're going to add in two entries, rd.break. So this ensures then that we stop after we've completed the RAM disk phase. And because we're using SE Linux, we're going to have to temporarily put it into permissive mode, because it's going to see errors if we make changes to the password file outside of the normal environment. So we're then going enforcing equals 0. So there are two options that we add in, rd.break and enforcing equals 0. With this then we can use Control and X to continue with the boot process. But of course we're only going to boot as far as completing the RAM disk phase. We can see then that we've been given the switch root prompt, and this is really the stage that we're at, where we're about to switch to the root file system. So we move over, Control and L, and we're going to have to remount our root file system. Currently, the root file system is mounted as read-only. We need to set it to read-write so we can set the password. So mount -O remount, comma read-write, and the root file system during this phase is mounted to the sysroot directory. So with this done, we can then use chroot to set a false root that points through to the sysroot directory. So now we're working with our real root file system that was previously mounted into sysroot. We can then use the password command to reset our password. We're getting a bad password, but don't worry about that. And we're looking then for all authentication tokens updated successfully. If we get an error coming back saying something like authentication token error or something like that, or failed to manipulate the authentication tokens, then double check that you've mounted your root file system as read-write. Now we need to set everything back, so we exit out of the chrooted environment and we up arrow key to the mount command and remount it as read only. So we just replace the W with an O, and then we can exit. This will exit and continue with the boot process. So we're going to be taken now to our default run level, but we're going to be in the SE Linux permissive state, and we're going to be changing that in a little while. If we didn't do this, the system would fail to boot, as we would have an error with a system file. So I can log in as my root user with the password now that I know. Now to restore the security context for the password file, which is etc shadow, we can use then restore con and /etc/shadow. So that resets its security context. It was edited outside of SE Linux, so lost some settings. Now with that in place, we can go and use the set enforce command, and have that to 1, so we're back in our enforcing mode for SE Linux, and more on SE Linux as this course continues. Now let's move back into our slides so we can summarize this section.